Good afternoon, guys. Good morning, wherever you are in the world. I have from Salt Lake City, Danielle Droitsch, and she is a leadership expert, executive coach. She works in the nonprofit, environmental, and sustainable areas, and she helps clients with strengths, confidence, and career direction. She's been through it all, and she's here to help the audience navigate career transitions, the uncertainty. I'm really happy to have her on and pick her brain for the audience. Danielle, welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Yeah. Briefly introduce yourself and we'll dive into the meaningful work that you're doing at your company.
Great. My name is Danielle Droitsch, and I am a lawyer turned career and executive coach. So I basically, my many stories that I hit a wall in terms of being happy in my career and try to figure out what would come next. And the journey I went on and what I learned, and both the things that helped me get clarity, but also what surprised me is what I work with professionals on today. I'm really excited to share my best secrets for how to navigate a career pivot or a transition, or just this idea of building your next chapter.
Mhm. Yeah. And one thing that a lot of my clients or people in the audience struggling with, a lot of them are mid-career doctors, dentists. They follow this established but these days more and more people are turning to gigs and multiple incomes and investments and entrepreneurs. How can people figure out how they work, how to love work, what they're meant to do if they don't fit into these kind of cookie cutter professions?
Yes, it's such a good question because I took that same journey of I was in a cookie cutter sort of full-time equivalent role and then found myself with a lot of ideas. And the ideas were every single possible idea that one could have. And it was a very messy process. So I'd love to help people not repeat what I did. But what I like to start with talking about is the basics, because when we start to think about the next chapter, whatever it looks like, entrepreneurial or not, we look outside ourselves. We go onto LinkedIn, we see what other people are doing, or we look at job descriptions, or maybe we get excited about some business we could buy, which is fine. Those are all good things to do, but the real secret sauce of figuring out what's your purpose and your path to fulfillment is actually inside of you. And I know that sounds very woo, but it's true. It's really about this idea of really figuring out your strengths profile, like where are you strong? What are your values and what are your interests? And in fact, those are the three things that I talk about all the time with my clients, is those three things: your strengths, your values, and your interests. And you notice I didn't say passion. Passion matters, but passion isn't one of the three things that we know and we understand to actually help you figure out work you love. So you can be passionate about something and also have it be your job. But sometimes people look at passion as a prerequisite. And in fact, I worked for, and I still do to an extent, in the climate space. For me, working on climate change is crucially important. It's a passion. But that particular passion didn't necessarily equal fulfillment for me. So if you're thinking about what comes next, start with a bit of an inward process, understanding where you're strong, your strength profile, if you will, your values, and then your interests. And those three questions can really unlock a little bit of the pathway. It doesn't define it all. You still will have a lot of ideas, but that's a foundation from where you begin.
Mm, yeah. A lot of what's interesting is this kind of, I think millennials are positioned, and I think Gen Xers were the first generation that kind of had to really shift to this new concept of work. And like millennials have it a little bit easier. Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they have the world at their fingertips. What is about the current situation that the workforce is so unhappy? What is all the big resignation all about?
Yeah, so we're still going through all of these machinations because we had the great resignation, but now that's over. But this story of what's happened to work really goes back before. It's gone, like, we're talking about 20 or 30 years where we had our grandparent or parents or grandparents. For them, it was you go to work, you get a job, you get a good job, you get a good pay, you get a house, you have kids. And that's really what they cared about, really. And we have that information from the polls. It's really what mattered. And the workplace is still organized around those same principles. And this is the thing, people have changed, but the workplace really hasn't changed. And so now you have all these people saying, I don't really want to go 9 to 5. I don't really want to be handcuffed to my job anymore. But the workplace is still run by people and led by people who live that sort of model of 9 to 5, go to work. And so that's why we have this. It's a bit of a revolt that's going on. But what's happened is that what matters to people has changed. So before it did matter, have a good job, 9 to 5, be able to have enough money to buy a house. That's not the priority. That's not the priority anymore. The priority now is you really want to love your job. You need to feel fulfilled. And that is way higher than it ever was before. Our parents and grandparents, it actually didn't matter to them as much as it matters to people like me and maybe you and the people that you're listening right now. So this idea of fulfillment is people are looking for jobs where they feel engaged. And that's the key word, is engagement. If you feel engaged in your job, then you lose time. You're super interested. You are like, you a whole day could go by and you're like, wow, that was great. That's what engagement looks like. So you don't need to feel happy necessarily, but you need to feel challenged. And so that new recipe for the workforce is what millennials, Gen Y, or Gen X, I'm Gen X, what we're looking for. But the workplace isn't really delivering that. Some workplaces are, they really do care about that engagement, but a lot of workplaces really haven't caught up. And so what does engagement look like? I'm going to go back to strengths as one of them. There's 8 to 12 measures of engagement. I'm not going to go through them all right now, but a couple of them are you have a chance to use your strengths every single day. That's someone that you feel that idea of purpose, that you feel that idea of creating impact, that you have a close friend or someone at work that you can connect with. Those are 3 examples of engagement. It's not necessarily that you're passionate about the mission of where you work. It's not necessarily that you make a lot of money, although we all love to make a lot of money. It's not so much about the engagement. So what we want to do is we want to figure out, what does engagement look like for you? And for me, as an example, engagement for me is connection with people. It's feeling that I'm creating a positive impact in someone's life. I like to have close relationships at work. I am a solopreneur, so I don't go to an office, but I connect with my clients and with others, and that's where I get my engagement level. And I'm also making good money. But that flexibility is really important to me as well. Like, I don't want to have a day where it's get up, go to work. I used to commute into Washington, D.C. every day, and that was really painful. And now I have a flexible life. I went skiing recently, for example, just during the workday because I wanted to. So what we want to do is try to figure out, what does engagement look like for us? And it's probably not necessarily 9 to 5, or it may not be. Another element of engagement is someone cares about my growth. Someone is interested in my growth potential. Now, for those of us who are solopreneurs or we're entrepreneurs, then it's not necessarily that someone above us is giving us that, but then we want to grow. Everybody needs to learn how to grow, how to constantly be challenging ourselves. So that's the idea of like building strengths. So there's a lot of different pieces, but what we want to do is take that step back and get to know who we are as people before we start to go and ask other people, because we can fall into traps. Oh, John over there, he built this business. That looks great. And then you get into it and you're like, that's not what I expected, because that's not really who you are as a person. So you really want to know, what are those things that make you tick and what gets you really engaged and excited? What do you want to learn? How do you want to challenge yourself? And there's a job out there for you. There's a business for you to run. I love this idea of multi-stream. I'm a consultant for the environmental world and I'm a coach. I didn't want to choose, and I have 2 streams of income, and that really works for me. And even in my coaching business, I have group programs and individual coaching. So I find different ways to kind of keep things really dynamic, but I'm always led by, do I want to do this? Is this going to engage me? Versus, oh, some other entrepreneur out there did that, so it looks good. And trying to mimic them doesn't always work because it's not necessarily what keeps me engaged. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And during your transition, how can one figure out their strengths or what they're good at and where to take their career if they aren't sure what to do?
Okay, so that is one of the biggest, most important questions people ask me. The interesting thing about strengths, so these are different than hard skills. Okay, so a hard skill is like maybe you have your listeners trained as doctors. You go to school, you learn very specific hard skills so that you keep people healthy and you don't make big screw ups. I'm sorry, but that's the thing, right? And so we want to make sure that the hard skills are quantified, if you will. But often hard skills are very limited because you basically get a hard skill from you go to school, you learn, it's something very specific and tangible. I know how to code, or I how to build an Excel spreadsheet, or it can be something basic like project management or speaking. But the strengths are really that secret sauce. It's really what sets you apart and makes you different. And it's not necessarily something that you can just pull out because they're so natural to you that you don't even notice them. So one set of strengths is around your ability to engage with people. So that set of strengths is your ability to connect with others, to empower them, to communicate, to help build harmony, to get people to agree, to do things together. Those are all these really, we call them soft skills, but they're really important because they show us this sort of secret sauce about how you engage with people. Another set of strengths are strategic thinking, your ability to take data and information, gather it, analyze it, generate ideas around that. So as an example, for myself, it's like I can get on a call with a client. They do a big download with me on all the different ideas they have. And then we can start to sort through the ideas to figure out a strategic pathway. And that's not a hard skill for me. It's something intuitively I can figure out how to help someone else. And then we have our influencing strengths, your ability to influence a group of people through speaking, through taking control of a room. And then the final area is execution, doing, like this idea of just being able to achieve big things, problem solve. That's another major soft skill. So I'm a Gallup trained strengths coach. So one place you can go is the Clifton Strengths Finder on the Gallup Corporation's website. And you can take the Strength Finder and they give you some clues. They don't tell you what you should do as an entrepreneur. That's not, unfortunately, we don't have that spelled out for us because everybody's different. But I've worked with people who have gone the entrepreneurial path. They've taken the Gallup Clifton Strengths Finder and they start to realize, oh, yeah, I'm really good at that thing. I'm extremely good at selling. I'm extremely good at speaking. And so maybe podcasting or blogging, or I'm extremely good at taking a project and initiating and building it. So what we want to do is we really want to get those down so that when an opportunity comes our way, you are like able to measure it against, oh yeah, am I actually really good at that thing? Is that something that I'm intuitively able to dive myself into? And I'm sure this is something you probably talk about with your listeners, but you may get excited about something, but what really matters is the longevity. It's around sticking with the plan. It's if you're going to build a business or you're going to build something entrepreneurial, and there's so many opportunities out there. It's infinite, right? The number of possibilities for people to actually make money outside sort of the traditional workforce. But to make it work, you have to stick with it. Why pick something that you're going to be drained by? Why pick something that's going to feel like really hard every day? Why not pick something that feels fun and engaging and challenging? And that's why you really want to get that piece down before you make these choices, because then once you do, you've got to stick with it. I did this 9 years ago. I left the full-time workforce 9 years ago. And my tenacity of sticking with it, because I've had fun, because I've enjoyed what I've done, has built me a major business. But if I didn't enjoy this, if I picked something different that sounded good on paper, but actually wasn't really in my strengths profile, I might have found myself walking away from that space. And then that's where businesses fail. So you want to do it because you'll love the work, but also because you'll have that staying power.
Yeah, I love that, hard skills versus strengths. So the other component of work is, and I know because a lot of people, it's not just business, finance, and career, it's also who they work with. And also, this idea of a partner and your relationships is also changing with the younger generation. What is your advice for the younger generation? Because a lot of, I read this article where just like millennials and Gen Z, they have a partner, but they were not gonna commit because that's very unstable and it's very high risk, and they rather put it into their career. So what is your tips or tricks for people that want to succeed in their career, but also have fulfilling positive relationships without all the drama like divorce and custody battles and lawsuits and all of that?
Yeah, so I'm absolutely we I'll start with this. I think we all do this. I've done this. Put a lot of pressure on career to be that fulfillment bucket. And I've talked to a lot of people. I talked to hundreds of people and it's like the career, the career. And I want it too. Like the career, we spend whatever, 8+ hours a day, many of us in our careers. And yet it's not really about just our career. If you were to look at some other places in the world, they have something called ikigai. I'm not sure if anybody's ever talked to you about ikigai before, but ikigai is a reason for being, essentially. And that's what it means, the translation. And it's your vocation is one piece of that, but it's really about your holistic, it's really defined by a bigger set of things.
Hmm.
So, my biggest piece of advice is to take that step back and look at your life and not just focus on the career piece. The career piece is important. Like, I'm a career coach, I get it. But I have found a lot of my fulfillment outside work. And so I volunteer, I nurture certain relationships, friendships, but also my relationship with my husband. I have a family. I spend time thinking about travel, making sure that my year is filled with experiential opportunities. For me, it's not about stuff, it's about experiences. And so I think we do get tripped up focusing really too heavily on the career, because when we take that step back and look at our strengths, look at our values, and look at our interests, you will find things that will be in your interest area that may not fit into your career. And that's okay. It's like totally fine. If you can pursue your interest outside your career, then do that. Don't wait for the career to suddenly line up perfectly. Same goes for values. You can live your values without necessarily making sure you work for the perfect company that has all the values you do. So I think that what I have seen is just this pressure that younger generations have placed on the career. And I ask people to step back from that. Not that we all have to make money, but to look more holistically, because that fulfillment that you asked me about, the fulfillment doesn't come from whether you have a great job or not. The fulfillment comes from how you design your life. And sometimes your job will be great and it will be fulfilling, or aspects of it will be, but other times it may be the job is meeting an economic need, but then outside work, you can actually build that fulfillment piece. So that's where I usually begin with people, because of the pressure we place on the career. But for those who really want to make the career piece extremely important, like in terms of fulfilling, then the next thing I suggest is taking risks. It's just, it can be very safe to be in a nine to five job. And I help people get 9 to 5 jobs all the time. But when we talk about making a change, any change, even if you're staying in your current job, even if you're staying, but you want to make it more fulfilling, there still is risk, because you're stepping outside of some sort of comfort zone. So there is risk assigned with creating fulfillment in your life. And that means you need to try different things. You need to sometimes fall flat on your face and you fail. Sometimes you need to, have a conversation with someone and you'll learn that what you're dreamed about really isn't the dream, or you have to spend some money doing something that feels like, wow, maybe I have to invest in my business, or I have to make some sort of commitment. And those risks aren't always going to pay off. I can tell you many different times of I've spent money on something like a course or something. And I'm like, oh, that was not a great use of my money. And yet my decision to unplug from the daily commute to Washington, D.C., the 8 hours that I went there, the slog of trying to meet my performance reviews, all those things it was worth every single moment of fear and risk that I went through, because now I have a life I can look back on and I can say, I have two businesses, I have, flexibility, I have freedom, and I've built it around me. It's not really built on some other person's trajectory. Like, I had to design it based on my natural strengths and my values and my interests. And it's changing all the time. I'm constantly making tweaks and changes to my journey, but I think it's worth it because now I won't ever look back and regret that I didn't try.
Mm.
Realize your listeners, maybe what you don't want to ever do is look back on your life and say, wow, I wish I had done that thing. I know that there's risk. Sometimes pulling the plug on a job is hard. I will share this, though, that I built my entire business as a side hustle. So for 18 months, I was more than that because I actually trained to become a coach. So I probably spent 2.5 years building everything I needed to do so that when I pulled the plug, I had already built some level of income. So I'm pretty risk averse. I'm not going to just up and leave, but I created the extra space and time. And my daughter was 3 years old. And it was really a very intense time as a parent, but I was so committed to a different path. I knew that there had to have been a better way for my career, and I found it. And I know everyone listening to this call can as well, but it does take a little bit of risk taking to go forward.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of regret, and also I think Jeff Bezos, he talked about from that regret minimization framework. And
Nice.
yeah, and what was interesting is you mentioned lifestyle design, and when people aren't equipped with these skills, and part of lifestyle design is taking risk. And so what is your advice? Because you said take risks. Someone who is risk averse, like a doctor, they're not going to take risks. So, but at this point, like they hate their careers. How
Mhm.
can people foster risk taking if they're risk averse?
So I've just finished this whole this whole entire deep dive into how our brains work. And so it's very interesting to me because a lot of what we do every day is run by our brain, right? We have like neural pathways in our brain and doctors would totally get this because they understand. It's not necessarily we do things because we choose to do them. We do them because our brain told us this was the pathway that you did. And so I just finished this like amazing brain science course where we talk about changing how we do, right?
Yeah.
And so if you think about the neural pathway as like something that's well rutted in your brain, like it's like a really deep groove, then you're not going to just suddenly up and change what you do every day. It's just not how the brain works. And so I've become really fascinated with this idea of mini habits. And the idea behind that is that we're not really looking for big, massive changes like when you go to the movie theater, right? You like go to the movie and then by 2 hours later, everything's changed. Everybody's married and has a new job. Everybody's happy. That's not how life works. It's never how life works. It's not we don't live in that. What we live in, the truth of the matter is that we need to make consistent changes on a regular basis. So if we're thinking about this idea of like maybe a doctor we all know that there's a regular sort of routine approach to being a doctor, and that's a rut in your brain, if you will. And you do that and it feels good because your brain's happy. Your brain doesn't want change. Your brain actually is very happy if things stay just the same. So it doesn't have to work very hard. So what does a risk look like? A risk could look like I'm going to take a course, or I am going to talk with a career coach, or I'm going to talk to you. Like, what are the ideas that are out there for me? I'm going to research. Maybe I want to buy a business and I want to know what that's about. I'm going to talk to people who have done this thing before because I want to learn from them. And that's actually pretty big stuff, stepping outside your comfort zone and even just trying on for size this idea of something that's different. So it's not about pulling the plug and saying, I quit, I'm going to start my whole life again. I'm going to just hopefully things figure out. It's just not really how most people do it. What most people do is they take some sort of risk for them And it starts with a small risk. It's a small risk might look, like I said, a sign for a course, hiring someone to talk to, meeting with someone who sells businesses. And all you're doing is allowing yourself that space of exploration so that you can explore. I will also share this, that we all have different conative styles. So a conative style is how you take action. And we don't think about conative styles like you might think about intelligence tests or personality tests, and everybody knows about those. But there's actually a way to measure your own conative style, which is just how you decide to move forward. And so some people require a lot more information than others. Some people are quick starts and they're happy to have they're okay with higher levels of risk and they jump in. Usually entrepreneurs are in that quick start category. But if you have a conative style, which is more in the fact finder space, then you need lots of information and data. And I'm sure lots of doctors have that because that's how they got into the profession. So what you really want is to know, what data do I actually need in order to feel satisfied? Because if you in the never ever ending loop of data gathering, then you're not actually doing anything other than just gathering data. But if you're doing it because you want to decide, maybe I'll buy a business, as an example, I need to figure out how to do that while I'm still a doctor because I don't want to pull the plug just yet. I want to build an income stream. Then you gather just enough data to say, do I have enough data to make a decision? Yes or no? And we have to be aware of our conative styles, because the fact finders will spend endless time in the loop of fact finding and never take action. We don't want that. We also, the quick start, sometimes dive in a little bit too quickly and then they fail fast. So we want to manage like those who are a quick start. So it's not really, there's not a right way. It's just knowing your own style and knowing that the way you take action, as in you make decisions, may differ from person to person. It doesn't make you better or worse. It just means you need to know your own style, because ultimately, going back to this sort of regret issue, I'll tell you this, when I was in my job, I thought about it for about 3, 4, 5 years. I remember it very vividly because I kept researching different things. And I got to a point where I was like, wow, I have been like thinking about this for many years. I'm not doing anything. All I've been doing is a little bit of research on the side. And I regretted that I'd spent that much time doing nothing. And so I had to make a choice. Are you going to keep researching this? Or are you going to actually do something about it? And what came across my plate was a course, and it was a coaching course. And I instinctively signed up, not even knowing whether or not I wanted to be a coach. All I knew was that it sounded interesting, so I went ahead and did it. And it wasn't until I finished the course that I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So it wasn't like I had decided to be a coach. It was, this is interesting to me. I would probably learn something. And then I signed up. And that's low stakes, right? Signing up for a course is not a high stakes thing. The high stakes thing was when I, at the end of the course, was told, now you can launch a business. And that's when I was like, ooh, that's a whole different thing. But I went ahead and did it. I had a small business as a side hustle and then grew it. But what I'm trying to say is that you do want to be aware of what can you do that's small enough to actually move you forward. So you build a new neural pathway in your brain that says, you know what? The world is not going to fall apart if I sign up for a course, or I buy a book about business, or I set up a call with Dr. Lou or whatever. That's low stakes. And then being aware of whether you're in that endless loop of fact finding. You don't want to be there. You want to say, what action can I take, even if it's a lower stakes risk, so that I can move to that next level and ultimately, actually change the pivot and the trajectory of your career.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because a lot of doctors, they're like, yeah, I need more information. And they just basically, it's another form of procrastination, the perfectionism. But ultimately, you need to pull the trigger. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think a lot of the audience would love to connect with you and learn more from you. And so how can they do that?
Okay, so I'm on LinkedIn. So if you go to the show notes, I have a very difficult last name. So just go to the show notes and you'll see how to connect with me there. I do have a free training, and the training is Make Your Next Right Career Move, a blueprint for high achieving professionals. The link should be in the show notes. And basically, it's a 15-minute training on what does it look like for you. And even if you're thinking about the entrepreneurial route, it still applies. It's really what is the process for actually making that pivot And so take a look at that. And yeah, and if people want to connect with me on LinkedIn, but ultimately I want to leave people with a note. Don't find yourself regretting what you didn't do. Take that action, whatever it looks like for you, so that you can have the career you dream of, because everybody deserves that.
Yeah, times are changing, and it's up to us to move forward and reinvent, make ourselves relevant. And thanks so much, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.